A thin boy, treated as a toy for wealthy people's amusement, was forced to take part in brutal life-or-death fights. No one had high hopes for him, yet he landed heavy punches and beat his opponent badly. He thought the fight would end right then. But such inhumane fights happened every day. For entertainment, a rich lady even spent a huge sum of money to have two people fight in her home. And the fight only ended when one person was completely dead. But why were these people willing to kill each other? The boy, named David, had just turned 18. While clubbing with friends late at night, he went to an outdoor toilet to pee, but before he could pull up his pants, he was suddenly knocked unconscious and stuffed into the trunk of a car. When David woke up again, he saw a strange man standing in front of him. He warily asked what the man wanted. The man said his name was John, and that he was sure tonight's show would be great. Then David was dragged out of the trunk. He was so scared that he screamed for help, but no one came even though he shouted himself hoarse. Soon, David was stuffed into the dark cargo hold of a truck. Horrifyingly, there were other people inside. The others immediately attacked David, and at the same time, the truck kept spinning in place. It seemed this was how they would decide a winner. At first, David just took the beating passively. It was only when he was truly terrified of being beaten that he fought back. When the cargo hold was opened again, David was covered in cuts and bruises, but it was clear he was the winner. Just as John was about to say something, David fainted uncontrollably. John prepared to shoot him dead with a gun. In the nick of time, an old man with a blindfold covering only one eye stopped John, but he didn't save David out of kindness. The old man was the leader of a kidnapping gang named George. He liked to kidnap young adults and put them in the truck's cargo hold to fight to the finish. The people in the cargo hold were the gang's army fighters. George had originally wanted to find a living punching bag for training, but he never expected David to turn the tables and kill them. With the army fighters, who he had trained for years, dead, George thought he had to make up for this loss, so he planned to squeeze every last bit of value out of David. David was taken away for treatment. In a daze, he heard someone talking to him, saying his current status was worse than a dog's. To survive, he had to obey obediently, not try to escape, and not ask questions he shouldn't. After the speaker left, David finally came to his senses completely. He felt intense pain all over his body. Even the tears he shed were mixed with blood. Despair and helplessness overwhelmed him. He couldn't understand why anyone would kidnap a man in this day and age. He endured the pain and looked around, only to find himself locked in a cell. Just then, someone passed food through a small hole in the wooden door. It took David a long time to accept the reality. He got up and splashed some water on his face to clean up briefly. As soon as he finished, John walked in. John glanced at the bowl of rice and warned David to eat well. Otherwise, how could he become a new army fighter? David was terrified. He said his parents must be busy looking for him, and they could pay money. He only begged to be set free, but John ignored him. Instead, he told David to clean himself up quickly. He didn't want to smell the disgusting stench when he got close. With that, John closed the door and left. Right after that, John went to the training ground and punched fiercely, not stopping to rest until nightfall. But he had only rested for a few minutes. When he was told David still wasn't eating, John immediately rushed to the cell, force-fed David, and warned him again not to resist. In fact, this kidnapping gang's base was at sea. David's chance of escaping was ridiculously small. But what on earth were they doing all this for? David was forcibly taken to the fitness area. Looking at the muscular, strong men all around him, he froze in place, too scared to move. At this point, John spoke up. He said that although David was as thin as a stick, he had hidden strength. He had actually killed an army fighter in the truck, and fought for a chance to survive. John hoped David wouldn't be ungrateful. Next, he would become part of the army fighters. He must remember to train hard and win fights, otherwise, death would be his only end. David didn't want to die young, so he had to obey and run to practice boxing. But his moves were so clumsy that they were ridiculous. John was also confused. How could such a useless person kill a well-trained army fighter? But now that things had come to this, John could only call other men to demonstrate for David. After that, David began to train desperately, as if his life depended on it. Afterwards, he would be taken back to his cell. After hitting the punching bag for a few days, John started having David practice real combat. At first, David didn't dare to strike, but after being scolded by John, he actually landed a heavy punch on his opponent. In the days that followed, David's life revolved between the cell and the fitness area. But he still had thoughts of escaping. Believing his parents and friends must be frantic with worry, during breaks, he huddled in the corner in a daze. Charlie, a fellow trainee, came up to him and told him to accept reality, and stop thinking about getting out. This place is hell. If you're caught trying to escape, death is the only outcome. To be honest, Charlie still couldn't figure out how David had killed the army fighter. Charlie warned him to take every chance to train. Otherwise, the next time he was sent to the truck, he would be the one getting killed. That night, John called out a few names, and told those men to prepare well. It would be their turn to take part in a fight the next night. And just like the fights in the truck, only by killing their opponent could they come back alive. Late at night, David went back to his cell. Charlie's words hadn't changed his determination to escape. He tried to remove the screws from the ventilation duct, but closed it right after taking a glance. There was no way he could escape through it. When it was mealtime, David scarfed it down so fast he barely blinked. His daily training load was huge. If he didn't eat well, he would probably starve to death within 3 days. The next day, David was practicing boxing fiercely. When John told him to try something different, he ordered someone to hold David underwater, to test his lung capacity. David struggled desperately to get out of the water, but Charlie held him down. It wasn't until John said enough that David was finally able to surface and catch his breath. But before he could catch his breath for even a few seconds, John told him to continue. By this time, David was no longer a helpless lamb to be slaughtered. He fought back fiercely against Charlie, because the gang's survival rule was simple: strength speaks for itself. During a break from training, David chatted with Charlie, and asked how Charlie had ended up here. Charlie said he owed a lot of money, and many people here had ended up in this place, because they had no other way out. David thought this was a way out. He begged Charlie to help him escape, promising to give Charlie a lot of money afterwards. He revealed that he was actually a wealthy second-generation kid. His father was very rich. At the mention of money, Charlie's eyes lit up immediately, and he wanted to talk to David in detail. David trusted him, but Charlie suddenly grabbed him by the collar and snapped at him, asking why he still hadn't gotten rid of his naive streak.
Siamo morti che camminano.
David was so angry that he wanted to fight Charlie, and Charlie happened to feel the same way. But just as they were about to start fighting, John came over and said the break was over. They then went back to training their lung capacity. David and John refused to back down. Both went all out to hold each other under the water. They fought more and more fiercely, venting all their pent-up anger on each other. That night, David was taken back to his cell again. He asked why others could live in the dormitory, while he was still locked up here. John said he didn't trust David. David begged John to let him call his family. He wouldn't expose the gang's existence. He just wanted to reassure his family not to worry. But John refused. A few days later, John served David a meat patty for the first time, and said he would have to fight a match that night. David thought he wasn't ready for training yet, but John said there was no room for negotiation. Fighting a match meant facing another life-or-death battle. He could only survive by killing his opponent with his bare hands. David felt devastated, but he definitely ate the meat patty. Usually, he only had plain rice, so this hard-won meat patty tasted especially delicious. After dinner, David and the others were loaded onto a truck. David was so nervous that he kept gasping for breath. Just then, George walked in and said there would be a lot of wealthy tycoons coming that night. They had to make sure the tycoons were entertained. With that, he left. Then John came up to David and said he needed a code name for the match, something tough. David said he wanted to be called Batista, and John agreed. Shortly after, David was called out to start the fight. When he got to the venue, David saw his opponent was very muscular. The wealthy spectators noticed this too, so they all bet on the muscular man to win. Encouraged by this, the muscular man landed a hard blow on David's nose, and grabbed his neck. David struggled with all his strength to break free. Knowing his opponent was slower than him, David tried every way to find an opening. Taking advantage of this, David struck his opponent crazily, giving him no chance to get up. His hard, flesh-striking punches hit the muscular man's face. His facial features were crushed and mixed with blood and flesh. But just as the muscular man was still breathing, David stopped. The spectator stands fell completely silent. John quickly walked over with a gun, and shouted at David to kill the muscular man. David certainly didn't want to die, so he had no choice but to kill his opponent unwillingly. He won the match and successfully helped George make money. The next day, John reported to George. David asked excitedly when David could fight again, and John said his wounds would take a few weeks to heal. On the other side, David was quite happy to see that Charlie, who had also fought a match, was still alive. Charlie opened up to David, saying he was unwilling to be just a nobody forever. He was looking forward to a bigger stage. Those bigger stage matches would be more dangerous, but the stakes would also be higher, and that way, he could pay off his debts faster. As a wealthy second-generation kid, David had never faced such troubles. He had lived a life of luxury, and had no idea about the hardships of the real world. It wasn't until he was kidnapped and brought to the gang that he realized how ridiculous he had been before. The next day, when the ship docked, David broke free from his restraints, rushed to the deck, and then jumped into the water. He swam as hard as he could toward the shore. After reaching the shore quickly, he ran wildly through the woods, daring not to stop for a moment. He rushed into a church in a panic, hurriedly closed the door, and begged the priest to call the police immediately. The priest fumbled around for a while, and said he had taken care of it, then began to recite prayers to him. David didn't understand why the priest did this. He just thought the priest felt sorry for him. A few seconds later, John actually came in from the side and grabbed David. Before leaving, he even thanked the priest for informing him. After that, John took David back and locked him in an iron cage, telling him he would have to fight again the next day. David was so angry that he shouted obscenities, yelling that he would kill John. He also threatened that he would never give up on escaping. If he ever got the chance, he would take ruthless revenge on John's family once he escaped. John told him to first focus on surviving until tomorrow. The next day, David went into the fight with anger in his heart. His eyes quickly turned sharp, and just a few seconds into the match, this fight made the name Batista somewhat famous. In the days that followed, David killed many enemies with overwhelming anger, helping George make a lot of money. Later, his fame grew even more. Looking at himself in the mirror, David felt completely unfamiliar with the person he had become. One day, David met Charlie, who had just finished a match, and Charlie told him a piece of good news. Charlie said that, as long as he won 2 or 3 matches in the high-level arena, he could pay off his gambling debts and regain his freedom. But David knew clearly that Charlie couldn't keep fighting. Charlie had been urinating blood for days, which was a clear sign of a serious health problem. David wanted to tell John about this, but Charlie begged him not to, saying everything was for the best. A few days later, Charlie competed in his first high-level match. He threw punches very quickly, trying to find an opening to knock his opponent down. But his opponent's strength wasn't to be underestimated. He seized the right moment and delivered a full-force blow, which hit Charlie's weak spot precisely. Charlie collapsed immediately. David was so anxious that he tried to rush onto the stage, but John grabbed him tightly from behind. In the end, David could only watch Charlie die helplessly. He felt wronged for Charlie. Charlie had been so close to freedom. John told David to face reality. No one could leave the gang alive, but David didn't believe it. In his eyes, John, who had once been an army fighter too, had escaped successfully. At the very least, as an instructor, John could enter and exit the gang freely, which was a way of getting out of the tough situation. David had experienced too many partings and deaths, and his state of mind had changed. He confessed to John that he had indirectly killed someone before being kidnapped. He deeply regretted his decision back then, and now he thought it was all retribution he deserved to stay in this dark gang for the rest of his life. After saying this, David went to his match. This time, the venue was a luxury manor, and there was only one woman in the audience. David killed his opponent without hesitation. The woman watching clapped her hands expressionlessly. She was clearly used to seeing lowly lives perish. After the match, David wanted to fight in the high-level arena to avenge Charlie's death, but John firmly refused. David couldn't understand why John had reacted so strongly. He went back to the gang confused and asked to see George. George did come, and he wiped his reading glasses before speaking. It was then that David noticed one of his eyes was damaged. George agreed to let David fight in the high-level arena. Strangely, though, John panicked when he heard this, saying David didn't have enough experience, and would likely die if he went. George said David was now very popular. No one had been optimistic about him at first, but he had proven to be the most promising. Just like John many years ago, knowing there was no room for compromise, John angrily went to confront David, saying the man who had killed Charlie was ridiculously strong. David would definitely die if he went. He asked why David was being stupid enough to throw his life away, but David insisted on fighting. A few days later, amid the cheers of wealthy tycoons, David's high-level match began. In this life-or-death battle, there was no politeness before fighting. Both sides did their utmost to kill each other. David summoned all his energy to fight back, but as John had said, his opponent was far too strong. The man pinned David to the ground and beat him relentlessly, leaving David with no way to fight back. It seemed the man was about to kill him. Then John drove David away to escape. When David opened his eyes again, he saw his own home ahead, and his parents happened to be at home. John told him to hurry and reunite with his family, but David refused without hesitation. He said his family would be safer if he didn't go back. He wanted to go with John, to a place where no one could find them, and live a stable and peaceful life. Afraid John would disagree, David earnestly begged him not to leave him behind. After that, the two lived a life on the run, hiding from place to place, although they lived in fear every day. This life was far happier than when they were in the gang. Every once in a while, David would go to the town to sell trees to make money, then go to the convenience store to buy cigarettes and alcohol. John, meanwhile, was like an old father. When he had time, he would help wash cars at a car wash, and when he got home, he would lean by the window to wait and see if David came back safely. One day, David said he had met a girl a few days earlier. She was a clerk at the convenience store. John immediately realized David was in love, but he reminded David that George hadn't given up looking for them. But David thought they had been hiding long enough. He wondered if the gang would really hunt them down for the rest of their lives, and John fell silent. That night, David met up with the girl he liked to chat. They went to the river and kissed passionately. The feeling of being in love was wonderful. As David was savoring the moment, John rushed over and asked if he had a good time the night before. David knew what he meant and said half a year had passed. George wouldn't keep wasting manpower and resources to find them. In his opinion, they could completely start a new life. But even though he said that, the shadow of the gang lingered over David. He often had hallucinations, seeing members of the gang appearing in front of him. David's girlfriend noticed something was wrong with him, so she hurried to comfort him softly. She also offered to learn about his past, even if it was messy. She was willing to spend the rest of her life with him. The next day, David went to John and admitted he wanted to take his girlfriend to meet his family, though he had lied to his girlfriend.
Ese es mi padre.
Then David brought his girlfriend home. She curiously asked about David's childhood, and John talked happily and vividly, as if David were really his own child. But for some unknown reason, John's expression suddenly changed. He then awkwardly went to the kitchen, holding back his tears. Late at night, after David saw his girlfriend off, he asked John who the child he had talked about was. John didn't answer. He only told David to cherish his girlfriend, as he could tell the girl truly liked David. In the days that followed, David happily enjoyed his love life. When his girlfriend proposed opening a shop, David said he would support her, no matter what she wanted to do. At the same time, John took out a photo with a solemn expression. When he unfolded the folded half, it could be seen that John had once had a happy and complete family. But what happened later? On the other side, David sent his girlfriend home, and then prepared to go back to his own place. Unexpectedly, he saw someone bullying a puppy on the way, and immediately rushed forward to stop it. He quickly set the puppy free, then threw violent punches at the man who attacked him. Only after the fight did he realize he had gotten himself into trouble. He hurried home and explained the whole story. When John learned David had killed someone, he suggested moving, but David couldn't bear to leave his girlfriend. He shouted angrily, blaming John for capturing him and taking him back to the gang, which had prevented him from staying with the person he loved. John told him to calm down, but David kept complaining. Helpless, John confessed the secret he had been hiding in his heart. In fact, Lily, the girl David had indirectly killed, was John's biological daughter. David was devastated when he heard this, and told John to kill him to avenge his daughter. John said he had indeed wanted to do that at first, but that wouldn't have helped him get over his pain. The reason he had helped David escape from the gang wasn't because he had forgiven David, but because he wanted to free himself from being trapped in the past. After John went back to his room, David collapsed weakly on the floor, and his thoughts gradually drifted back to the past. At that time, he was partying wildly in a nightclub. He spotted a beautiful girl in the crowd. When she asked why he was staring at her, David praised her for being very beautiful. When he learned her name was Lily, he said he wanted to take her on a date to the beach, but David was too impatient. Without asking for Lily's consent at all, he forced himself on her. Lily's face turned grim. When David saw she looked unhappy, he immediately pulled up his pants and left. After coming to her senses, Lily cried and sent a message to her father, saying she had been violated, and begging him to come and take her home. After sending the message, she went to wait by the roadside. When John saw the message, he called his daughter, but the call wasn't answered. John went to his daughter's grave. He apologized for not having the courage to come and visit her for so many years. He was drowning in sorrow when George found him. David said they had known each other for nearly 20 years, and he never thought John would betray him for an enemy, adding that anyone who did wrong must pay the price. John told David to do it quickly, but David said it wouldn't be here, then turned around and left. John took this chance to glance at his daughter's grave, and tears mixed with longing poured down. David prepared to take his own life, with a pistol to atone for his sins, but a sudden phone call interrupted him. David answered in confusion and found it was George calling. David said he had John in his custody, and threatened David to return to the gang to meet him. He might consider letting David see John. Of course, David could also choose not to come, but if he didn't, John would suffer the consequence of having no one to collect his body afterward. David already felt he owed John a great deal. He had killed John's daughter, and no matter what he did, he could never make up for it. How could he let John be killed? So he decided to go to the gang to save John. Coincidentally, the bus stop to the city was right next to his girlfriend's shop. They exchanged a glance, and David still boarded the bus resolutely. His girlfriend seemed to sense something. As she watched the bus drive away, tears flowed down her face unconsciously. Then the bus traveled for a long time before David saw the gang members. He was taken to George on a motorcycle belonging to the gang. David demanded to know what it would take for George to let John go. George ignored him and only ordered his men to lock David in the truck's cargo hold. Back in this familiar place, David immediately got into a fighting stance, but when he heard the sound of another person's breathing, he was shocked to find that his opponent was actually John. The movie ends here. After watching this movie, many viewers said it was too abstract. For a while, people couldn't even figure out what the movie was trying to express. Out of curiosity, I searched for information and found that the movie actually had quite a lot to convey, but none of it was very obvious. For example, it attempts to criticize the dark side of society. Criminal gangs treat human lives as tools to make money, forcing people to take part in life or death fights, while wealthy people, from their privileged positions, spend money for amusement, reflecting the chaos of social order in some regions. But the movie only gives a close-up of one female millionaire's expression, while the others are just glossed over. This makes it impossible for the audience to deeply understand the deeper meaning behind it. What do you think about this? If you like my channel, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe.